Hello and welcome back to another NihongoGamer video. Just recently, Steam put on their YouTube page a video about Verified, or Deck Verified, which is their system which they're going to be rolling out when the Steam Deck arrives, and I'm really excited about it. As you know, I'm already really excited about the device in general, but I particularly like how they're rolling out these videos. So this one is called Steam Deck Introducing Deck Verified, and this was one of the things I was really kind of worried about. Not worried about, but one of the things that I was kind of thinking about when the Steam Deck was first announced, because as you know, there is a console out there which is, the form factor that everyone wishes we could have for a Steam device, but until now, we didn't really have them. And people did try to make them, but they cost between like $500 to over $1,000, and often they're not really ideal systems. They're still basically running Windows, and you just have to run Windows but on a tiny screen without a keyboard and without a mouse, and it's just not ideal. Obviously, there are ways to make it work, but it just wasn't consumer ready, right? The main thing that I think is exciting about the Steam Deck is that it's one major step closer to being consumer ready. I think if you put this on the shelves, though, it would still kind of scare people off. I think people might still be a little bit shocked when they buy a Steam Deck and go on the store and they're like, oh wait, not all the games are even playable on this device. It's like I have to click on this little tab. Anyway, that's what we're going to be talking about today. So check this out. You can see another closer look that I think we hadn't had a look at this until this point on the store, how it's going to change for Steam OS 3. I believe it's going to be when they release Steam Deck. The main thing that's going to be interesting and useful is this panel here. Great on deck. So again, I think a consumer who's never owned a handheld console before, if they buy a Steam Deck, they're going to be a little bit slightly, overwhelmed. But anyone who's used Steam before, this is going to be a walk in the park. You're going to buy a Steam Deck. You're going to go, okay, look, I already have a Steam library. That's where my installed and, all my games, 41 of them, I know that they're in there, but great on deck. That's the tab that I need to click on to make sure that I'm playing the games that actually work on my Steam Deck. The thing that's exciting, I think, especially for a device like Steam Deck, is that the type of person who's going to buy this already knows that these devices, it's impossible to run the really high-end PC stuff. And there are some games which just straight up aren't designed to work on a handheld or lower spec PC at all, right? And that's why this page is going to be really useful. But the people who buy a Steam Deck are ready. They're ready to hack their games into a shape where it's kind of playable. That's kind of what's exciting about the PC platform. It's one of the main things that is really awesome is I don't have the money to buy the highest spec PC, but I can upgrade my graphics card later down the line. And okay, I'll have to play Street Fighter with 5 pixels by 3 pixels and it'll look like a potato, but at least I can still get into the game. Whereas with PlayStation and with Nintendo Switch or with Xbox, it's look, there is a price of admission. You pay it, and if you can't pay it, you don't get in. But with PC, it's you can pay any amount of money you want, run the most potato PC of all time, and you still get in. There's no extra cost of admission. Steam Deck is going to kind of mix those attitudes, those approaches together. I think it's going to be the console approach where there is a price of admission. It's $400, which is kind of what you would expect to be paying for a games console. But it's not that you have to only play games that work on Steam Deck. It's you can actually run a lot of the games that you already own and just kind of hack them into shape and make them work. That's what I presume is going to happen. That's the main joy of running PC. It's it's not really meant to work, but we're gonna make it work. Anyway, as a consumer experience, though, I think this page is really good. And the reason I think this video in particular was really well done is that they've been very conservative with their expectations of what the store is going to look like. So, for example, it says verified here, and this is important because getting this check mark is going to be something developers want. Okay, if a huge number of people who are going to be buying this device, it means a huge jump in sales. Maybe for a game that you made 5 years ago, suddenly there might be a chance to be successful on a handheld. Maybe your game isn't super AAA and so it got lost in people's backlogs, but now the handheld Steam Deck is coming, it's this is the perfect time to jump into some of those lower spec system requirement type games. Anyway, if you can then patch your game to a point where you can get this verified checkmark, I think that's going to be a significant boost in sales. So people are going to be aiming for this. But people who don't patch their games and, still manage to get a significant sales boost, which a lot of the big publishers, maybe they just won't bother to patch it, but people already own the games anyway, and so they'll be able to run them. That's where this next category is really useful. Playable. Now, what's really interesting about this video, though, is that they didn't say, look, if the game runs generally, we're going to be putting it in verified. What they actually said was, even if you might need to type your name on a keyboard just to insert your player name when you start a new game, or certain information would normally require a mouse and keyboard type interface, they're going to put it, then you don't get into the verified category. So they're being quite tight on the requirements for being in the verified category. Even something simple like needing to write your name on a keyboard, suddenly you don't get to be verified. You get put in playable. So this brings me to the topic of how I think this is going to really transform the store to make it like an even better experience. Because one thing I mentioned in my video, my video was called Steam Deck Everyone Will Want One. I was kind of hoping / predicting that developers and people involved in this area of the market would kind of centralize around the Steam Deck as a baseline device. It's like, okay, this is the device that it has to work on. And because of this checkmark, it better incentivizes companies to want to make the experience better, this checkmark. So I'm kind of glad that this is going to exist. And I'm glad that they're going to be quite strict. That, anything that makes it slightly obtuse or abrasive trying to get into this, they're going to not give you the verified checkmark. You're going to be put on playable. So again, for power users, that's no big deal. This yellow circle with an eye in it, that's not going to scare anyone off. But I think for average consumers, this checkmark is going to be valuable. And also, even if people aren't obsessed with the checkmark, I think developers are going to want the checkmark on their games, especially the smaller devs that are kind of like, okay, this is our chance to get a massive sales push once more. Let's push out a patch for this game that we made ages ago. It could be profitable and it'll be worth it. And hey, as consumers and gamers, we're going to be very grateful if you do put these patches out. But I think what I really like about this system is how it's going to kind of transform the PC gaming experience to be a little bit closer to the benefits that we experience on console. In general, I've always been a kind of console gamer. Like, when I was a kid, I was dabbling with PC, but it was always a headache. The games always crashed because I didn't have quite the right hardware to run the game at the proper spec, or, I had other apps on the computer that were already broken, and so those apps would break, and then Windows would break, and then, the game, even though the game wasn't broken, the game would also break, and you get blue screens of death. In general, I always found that the console experience as a kid was just safer and more consistent. You put the cartridge in, like I've got a Super Nintendo right there. You put the cartridge in, you turn it on, it works. You play for an hour, you play for 3 hours, you play for 5 hours. Generally, it doesn't overheat and die, you just play it. But with a PC, it's just like, okay, we're kind of falling apart because your installation of this virtual device driver is broken, even though it's not related to the game at all. It's caused your computer to crash, and now the game has crashed. And so, as a kid, the PC gaming experience, I still used PC because there were things that you could only do on PC. But in general, the console experience was always smoother. And even to this day, when I stream games, I'm like, look, I can play games on my PC, but I don't have like a multiple PC setup, and still playing the game, like a fighting game, on my PlayStation 4 and video capturing that into my PC just keeps them separate so that there's like less stress on either system. Basically, I don't have an ideal setup. And I would imagine that most people on PC don't have an ideal setup. Everyone has an ideal setup in mind. They'd like to have a GTX 3090 or whatever the newest card is. They'd like to have a Ryzen 5900 or whatever the fastest AMD processor is right now. Most people have a PC and then they just have a system which is not quite the ideal setup that they'd like, but they'd like to have it eventually. And because it's a PC, they can upgrade to it over time. But with that flexibility and with that fragmentation of devices, you also get the issues. And I'm hoping that this verified system for the deck just creates a slightly more console experience. On the actual store, the first tab is Great on Deck. And if you're just a simple first-time buyer, first-time consumer of Steam products, and you just go to Great on Deck, and then you know that everything's going to be a smooth experience. You're not going to have to buy any special hardware to make this work. You're not going to get to a situation where like it's going to ask you to type your name in. It's like you can't find the on-screen keyboard, or there's like you've got to do something with a certain peripheral that isn't actually part of the Steam Deck. Obviously, there is an on-screen keyboard on Steam Deck, but you know what I mean. What I'm really trying to say is that until now, there hasn't really been any sort of baseline PC that everyone really ought to be buying for the year 2021 or 2022. Like, what is the baseline PC that we should be aiming for? And with the advent of a product like Steam Deck, finally it's like you can recommend to your friends get into PC gaming. Because even today, if I met a friend like at a fighting game event and they're just like, oh, I'd really like to get into Street Fighter, they'd be like, but what device should I buy? I'd be like, if you just buy a PlayStation and a controller, you can get into Street Fighter. I don't know if I would recommend getting a PC, mostly just because of the cost. It's like, well, if you want to run it smoothly, you are going to have to get a moderately strong PC, and then also you're going to have to set it up and you have to go through Steam and make sure that your controller is actually compatible with Steam, although most fight sticks are compatible with Steam. It's just the console experience, even though it's limited, it is also more consistent. It's more reliable. I can send a friend to a PlayStation, and I know exactly what kind of experience they're going to get. With a PC, sometimes I tell people like, yeah, you should really get a PC because it's more flexible. And then they're on the phone to me the following week, like every few days, like, well, how do I fix this? How do I do this? Oh, should I upgrade to this new thing? And should I update this thing, or should I leave this off? It's just like, should I set my firewall this way? It's just like, oh, Windows is telling me to do this. It's like there's so many things that for the Luddite, for the layman, for the person who hasn't been using a PC recently for the past few years, a lot of stuff just comes out that you're just like, oh my god, I didn't think this was going to be a problem, and now I have to be on the phone with you for a really long time fixing it. I think that's going to change with the Steam Deck. I think one of the main powers of this device is that finally we can recommend PC gaming to people who don't already own a PC. And to be honest, more likely than not, I think people who buy a Steam Deck are going to end up buying themselves a tower PC as well. They're going to be like, well, I've got 50 games on my Steam Deck, and hey, there's a bunch of games I'd like to try, but they would be so much better if I had a PC. It's just like, this is going to be the gateway product. I don't want to use the other word. This is the gateway product, which will lead to the excitement and fun and more complicated, but more rewarding experience of getting either a gaming laptop or a gaming PC, or building your own PC. Just like there's a whole enthusiast world out there if you go deeper. And the Steam Deck is definitely the gateway to that. And the reason I think that is because of this verified system. I think this is going to do a good job of making it feel a bit more like a console without limiting anyone who doesn't like the limitations of console. And as a result, we can recommend it to our friends. And to be honest, even though I didn't know about this, I probably already have been. I think anyone who's like looking to buy like a PlayStation 4 now so they can get it to Street Fighter 5, I'd be like, if you just wait a little bit longer, you could get yourself a Steam Deck, and I think your world will be wide open to like, oh my god, like you get a PlayStation, of course, there's some awesome stuff on PlayStation, but you're at the will of Sony and the prices and the PlayStation system where you have to pay monthly just to play the game online. It's like, if you get into Steam, you can play online games for free without any subscription. You can modify games if to your heart's content. If it doesn't run on your PC, you can just like run it in potato mode. But like Steam Deck, it's going to be the smooth experience, the smooth, unabrasive experience that you get with getting into any console like a PlayStation, Xbox, or a Switch, but with all the flexibility and the sort of future-proofness that you get by joining a PC-based system. Because if you move on to PC after that, or you decide to own a PC as well, you'll have the same library available on your PC, on any of your PCs. To try and explain all the benefits of owning a PC in Steam rather than a console would take, it would be like 8 videos, to be honest, so I'm not going to make that video right now, but you understand what I'm trying to say. Anyway, that's all for now. Just wanted to make a quick video about this verified system, which I'm all for, and not only because I think it's going to make the Steam Deck a more successful product, but because of how I think it's going to transform PC gaming in general. It's like, no, it's not the baseline PC that everyone is supposed to have, but if you're going to recommend Steam to someone, you know, the first point of call as a device I would recommend to someone who doesn't have any kind of PC gaming device at all is a Steam Deck, of course. Like, I think stock is going to be difficult at first, but for $400, at least they can own a Steam Deck. They can already have a controller built in. Plus, all of Valve's efforts to really make the experience smoother. I just think before this point, I always would have just told people, just buy a secondhand PS4 and a controller and you can get into Street Fighter. But it's like, it would be difficult to not recommend a PS4 at this point, when it's like, at this price point, you get a Steam Deck. It's portable, it's battery powered, you can take it anywhere, it's got controllers built in, you can play all of your Steam library if you already have Steam, but if you don't have Steam, like, it's going to be so easy to get into, and the Great on Deck tab means you're not going to make any mistakes spending $60 on a game that doesn't even run on your device, which is one of the massive risks of getting into PC gaming. It's like, yeah, I finally bought a VR PC. It's just like, yeah, but to actually play VR at a refresh rate that doesn't hurt your eyes, you needed to get a better graphics card. It's like, there are pitfalls and risks when you get into PC gaming, and the Steam Deck is really looking like it's going to be the device that I would happily recommend to people who are just getting into gaming, which is always a good thing, right? If you liked this video, I've got a few others on the Steam Deck and plenty more planned for the future, especially when the device actually finally releases. We don't even have it yet, so I'm really excited about when the device finally does launch, so subscribe to the channel if you're looking forward to seeing more content on that. Leave a comment below if you're excited, or maybe you think this is a bad thing. Maybe you think that the verified system is going to limit developers, or they're all going to like aim low now. They're not going to be trying to make stuff that's great, like a triple A experience. They're going to be like, yeah, well, as long as it runs on Steam Deck, that's good enough. Maybe it's a bad thing. Let me know what you think in the comments. Like the video, that always helps the channel. And I will see you all in the next NihongoGamer video.